lovely. Thank you.
We kissed. We kissed. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. Hi. Thank you. Now, that's all right. You don't have to do that. Thank you. First of all, I want to say how happy I am to be here in Calgary because Saskatoon is just a little too fast-paced for me.
So I always have problems.
Actually, I know why they were clapping.
Oh, why?
You may not know this.
No.
About 40 years ago or more, 45 years ago, I did a show called The Funnier Side of Eastern Canada. It was on TV here in Canada. We shot it in Toronto and Montreal. And I kept saying, why are you calling it The Funnier Side of Eastern Canada? Because wouldn't it be better, The Funnier Side of Canada? And they said, well, Air Canada is sponsoring it, and they don't fly to Vancouver.
But that's really...
That's a really...
Have a seat.
Yeah, let's sit down.
Have a seat. That's a real thing, the funnier side of Eastern Canada.
Yes, it's a real awful thing. I shot in Toronto and to Montreal. It was a great time.
I would think it would be one of the less promising titles for a program going on American syndication, the funnier side of Eastern Canada.
That's what I thought. It just doesn't have a ring.
No, it doesn't. It's not like...
But I'm glad to be here and realize that Western Canada is also funny.
Yes, exactly. Here. But this is not your first time in Calgary.
No, I've been here many times. I came here in the, by the way, I've realized I can't turn my head this way because I'm off mic. It's like singing in the rain. Singing in the rain. Yeah. Because the reason I love Calgary is that.
That really happened here. Tell us more.
And then... Sorry, I'm coughing. Okay.
All right.
I'm going to keep coughing. I'll cough until I'm not coughing anymore. All right.
Steve...
By the way, look at all the beautiful art that is here. I must say I'm very impressed that this is... that this is being auctioned here. I love this piece. So many good things. Really nice.
No, it's wonderful. Last year's auction was fantastic. Now I'm going off.
Did they do an auction last year?
They did an auction last year.
Oh, so I'm the second one to be invited. Okay.
Do you know? Better late. We're going to talk some. I want to talk some about art because you and I have been friends for a long time, and unlike your fake showbiz friends, our friendship is rooted.
Is real.
Is rooted in art.
That's right.
Is in art. We met actually at the opening night of an exhibition, the only exhibition I was ever allowed to curate.
What was that?
High and Low.
Oh, High and Low, absolutely.
At the Museum of Modern Art, and have gone on talking about art.
Kurt
Varnado, the great curator, sadly gone. And we've been talking about art in all that time since. And so I want to ask you, Steve, the question that I was trying in the hopelessly pompous and abstract way to answer a little while ago. Why does art play a role in your life? I don't mean art just in the sense of everything you do, music, but specifically art.
I'll get to that. But first, I'm going to tell you. First, I thought your keynote speech was fantastic. And when I first started reading you back in the 80s? Yeah, in the New Yorker, I felt like Butch Cassidy. You know, and they're being pursued by these. He goes, "Who are these guys?" I thought, who is this guy? It was so good and so easy to understand and easy to follow. And that's what I do appreciate in art is when it's taken out of the realm of the esoteric and brought down so we can discuss it, we can have fun and interpret it for fun. So anyway, my life in art. I grew up in...
You can go on praising me indefinitely, Steve.
Pardon me?
You can go on praising me indefinitely. We can fill up the time.
I'll get it in there later.
All right.
Yeah, and I went to college in Orange County, California, where Disneyland is. I worked at Disneyland from when I was 10 till I was 18 with various little jobs. They probably were illegal, but it was so much fun. And then I went to college at Long Beach State, California, and I had an artist friend. he was an artist, and he was very thoughtful, and he liked to talk about art. So I got interested in, and if you think about it, I went to college in 1964, and if you think about that year, you have, in the early 50s, you have the abstract expressionists, and then they're taken over by, Colorfield and Morris Louis and all these people. And then you have Andy Warhol, Roy Lichtenstein, Rauschenberg, and Jasper Johns right on the scene at that moment. And it was very exciting. All the news coming from New York. And there's this thing about art that you believe you're supposed to go into a rapture, when you see it. So I kept waiting for the rapture, and I would, I'd go see a Rodin sculpture, and I go, I think I'm having the rapture, and it just doesn't work that way. It's like music gives you a rapture, but art can be more thoughtful. You revisit it over time, and I just pursued it, and I was just very interested. I was interested in collecting. I liked the aspect of the books. When I would tour around the country as a comedian, I would stop in. I would often play colleges, and they would have a library, and I would go into the college library and find all the books. That I was also a art book collector, because I knew felt that was important to the scholarship of art. And I could go to museums. It always gave me something to do, always gave me something to talk about, and feel superior about.
Very important part.
Yeah, very important.
Very important part,
yeah.
Right.
That's why I'm here tonight.
Yes, exactly.
To feel superior.
You can feel to all the people.
Is someone joining us, by the way?
What? No, I think that's for Elijah, the prophet, who's going to come arrive later. But I think this is something you said a moment ago, I think, as we were just talking about earlier, and I think it's very important. And that is that the art, visual art, right, really does benefit. Your understanding of it changes and depends on not just how often you see it, but in your knowledge of the hierarchy of effects it produces.
Yes.
You were saying.
Well, I was talking about, as a young, naive art collector wannabe, or art connoisseur wannabe, I was introduced to the paintings and work of Cy Twombly. And if you don't know his work, it's there's two types. One is looks like a blackboard with chalk circles on it, and another one will be all white, and he'll just have scribbles
And scrawls and graffiti.
And by the way, this is a highly important artist, and he was just kind of emerging at the time in the 60s and 70s. And you look at it, you think, I'm looking at circles, and I'm looking at squiggles. And you think, what am I supposed to think about this? And you go, that's just stupid, that's just stupid. Then you go around to a museum, and then you see another Cy Twombly. You think, I don't get it. I don't know what I'm talking about. Then you see your third or fourth or fifth Cy Twombly, and you think, that one's better than the other ones. And now you've crossed the line. Right. You've now, you're actually kind of thinking, this one, and then the next one. And then you start to have a basis to think about it.
Absolutely.
And Twombly elevated as an artist, in my mind, as one of the great artists of the 20th century. I had a thought. Come on. Anyway, it doesn't matter.
But no. The thought, if I may, is exactly. And the other cool thing that happens when that happens is.
I just remembered. You finished.
Go. Well, my thought was that. Not only do you have the fun, you take it.
No, I can't. No, you tell. I'll remember.
Not only do you have the fun of actually having a hierarchy of Cy Twomblys, of squiggles, right? Suddenly say, very good squiggle, so squiggle.
Yeah.
But then when you start looking at squiggles in the world, you say, a little like a Twombly, right?
Yeah. Well, I often have had the experience that the artists I've grown to love have been artists I initially either disliked or didn't get or didn't care about. And you sort of have repetition when you see them, and they just start to enter a niche in your brain, and then they start to have a language that of either comparison or something subtle, or you kind of understand what he's getting at, and what he or she is getting at may not be expressible in words.
Yeah. And
sometimes you just know that, he or she really accomplished what they set out to do in this picture.
And who are some other?
Arthur Dove.
Uh-huh.
Arthur Dove is an American painter from the 30s, abstract, and he'd paint very abstract pictures of like a boat in a harbor with a foghorn, and the horn is expanding, and a beautiful, beautiful work. but he's not known here. But
Yeah. Is that true? Well, someone you have made known who's central to Canada, or helped make known in the States.
In the United States.
In the United States is Lawren Harris. That was an astonishing thing. Steve co-curated the first exhibition
I
of Harris.
started coming to Canada in, say, the late 60s, and then just continued. I worked on television shows. I worked on the Ray Stevens Show, shot in Toronto. Yes, I worked on the Ken Berry's Wow Show.
Oh, a classic.
Yeah. The applause is
it's deafening.
Unbelievable. They're thinking, I didn't know he worked on that. And then I toured in Canada and did movies in Canada. I have friends from Canada. So I slowly became aware of Canadian painting, especially the Group of Seven, because I liked anything that you can sort of label. As you know, in America, there's a group from the early 20th century called the Eight.
Yes.
So I thought, the Seven. I wonder if they're as good as the Eight. But I really liked, I don't know, I like just like getting to know it, and I raid Canadian bookshops and find books on the artists.
You notice, by the way, we call them in Canada, we call them the Group of Seven. It's very American to say
the
Eight, but the
I know
group
Group
means
of Seven.
we pull them to, no, I'm just making the point, we like to have them as a little group.
But
no
the Group
hierarchy.
of Eight doesn't work.
Yeah, no, exactly.
It's like,
just
if they had been 8, we would have no success.
Right.
So I
So you got interested in Harris.
I got interested in Harris. Somehow I picked on him for some reason. I don't know why. I just really liked them. And then one night in Los Angeles, I own a couple of small Harrises, and the director of the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles came to dinner and filmed it, and she said, "Who's that?" And I went, "I'm glad you asked." And I explained who he was, and I said, no one in America knows who this guy is, and I think he's really important internationally. And she said, well, I'm going to Toronto. I said, well, go to the AGO and take a look at the pictures. She said, okay. And then she came back and said, would you like to curate a show of Lawren Harris? I said, and I thought about it, and my first reaction is, of course, no, it's absurd. And then I thought, hey, I'm the perfect guy.
Yeah. Was it a good experience?
It was a great experience. It showed at the Hammer Museum in Los Angeles, went to the Boston Museum of Fine Arts in, guess where? Boston. And then it went to the AGO, where it was combined. Andrew Hunter did a beautiful curatorial work of explaining Harris in context of Toronto and its history. It was really nice. And I traveled around and actually went to Saskatoon.
Looking for
look at
pictures.
Paintings, yeah.
Looking for pictures, right. And finding them. It leads me to something we've spoken about isn't the case, or is it just something we tell ourselves, that did Harris go on giving you more and more the longer you lived with him and the more time you spent with him?
Yes, absolutely. That's the thing about a great, I like paintings, you like paintings, so we'll keep it to paintings, not just artworks, because in contemporary world they can range all over the material map. But I find that certain pictures just keep on giving. And some, not that they're bad artworks, they kind of stop after a couple of years, and then but other pictures they just, you can't stop looking at them. I mean, my wife and I used to joke that we'd go take a glass of wine and go sit in front of a painting like it was a TV show.
After dinner,
yeah. Look at that and look at that and look at that.
There's short form paintings, long form paintings, and ones that go on.
Yeah, series, Netflix paintings.
Yes, exactly. And you have to, and go on. But I think that's true. I don't think that's just it's a fantasy that happens, and it does. And I think you're absolutely right that and one of the things you learn in the course, I think, of your life as a looker, which is complicated. And by the way, what do you say? The Moment of Rapture is a wonderful title for a
Sounds
book
like
about
an
this.
off-color film.
Yeah, exactly. An old Canadian X-rated film.
Yeah.
The Moment of Rapture, a Quebec film from the late '60s. Is that exactly where the dividing line is? And I studied with, I was lucky enough to study with Kirk Varnedoe, who was the best of the kind there ever was. But I also studied with William Rubin, who was a formidable curator and observer.
Of MoMA.
Of MoMA, before Kirk was.
Museum of Modern Art in New York City. In case,
Exactly. And
sounds like you're mispronouncing Mama.
Well, Mama too. My mama actually was an interesting art personage. since you ask,
Yeah.
she wrote for Arts Canada. She was an art critic before I was. She wrote for Arts Canada back in the 60s. And it's a famous story in our family because when my then girlfriend, or I was hoping to make her my girlfriend, Martha, came for dinner the first time, we argued vociferously at the family table about generative art, the rights and wrongs of generative art. And being a very alert and brilliant girl, she was 18, she went off to the library because she feels she needed to get caught up on generative art, not knowing that this was an art movement that had been named by my mother and attacked by my little brother, who's now an art critic, so it existed only within the dinner table. I was about to say, Bill Rubin used to say that the hardest thing to learn was to distinguish pretty and beautiful. And that it was being able to know that in 1905, right, when Raoul Dufy and Henri Matisse were painting side by side and had equivalent reputations, that Matisse would be great and Dufy would be minor.
And how could you know?
Because of what you were talking about a moment ago. I don't think you can codify it into a simple rule, but that if it immediately appeals to you, there's probably something wrong with it.
Yeah, I think it was Ed Ruscha who said, you look at bad art and you go, wow, huh? And you look at good art and you go, huh? Wow.
Yeah, exactly. I had not heard that. Actually, that makes me lead to a question we've never discussed. You were talking about being in the 60s in California and all the stuff that was coming in from New York, but what about California? Art. Were you aware of Ruscha and those guys?
Ruscha I was very aware of. I was friendly with one of his closest friends, Mason Williams, who, you know the song Classical Gas? Yeah, he wrote that song. He was a writer on the
Smothers Brothers.
Yeah, Smothers Brothers. I was a writer on the Smothers Brothers in the late 60s. And they were very close, Ed Ruscha, so I stupidly didn't buy anything except a little print. But by the way, I just remembered something that has nothing to do with what we're talking about. I can drive Marty Short crazy at any moment because on the show, Funnier Side of Eastern Canada, I met his wife before he did.
Really, Nancy?
Yes, she was a dancer in the show, very nice. And
did you merely meet his wife before he did?
That's all I did. All I did was say hello. Yeah. I said, Marty, what would you do if I had slept with Nancy? And he said, I would never speak to you again. Huh. I said, you can't blame me if I didn't. But I didn't, of course.
Good. That's...
Now you know more than you ever wanted to know.
About...
Yeah. Now let's see what the headline is tomorrow.
All right, I'm going to ask you, because we're having such a classy conversation.
Yes, right.
I'm going to ask you a dumb journalist question, which you and I have never discussed. Is there a reason why so many, you mentioned Marty Short, why so many amazing comedians are Canadian?
Well... it's endless.
It's an endless list.
The list is endless, and I kind of feel that there's some, because the cliche is Canada is proper, and so the comedians that come from Canada are emerging out of propriety, and they're turning it on its head. And somehow that is very appealing, that there's two things if you think of Jim Carrey, he even looks proper.
Yes.
And then he doesn't act proper.
They're emerging from propriety into anarchy, from Canada to the United States. Yeah. And that's inherently...
That's my theory.
And that's inherently funny. But that's true if you think about it. Jim Carrey's like that. Marty's like that. Marty looks like the most normal human being imaginable, right?
I've said it's not a particularly... compelling quote, but I've said chaos in the middle of chaos isn't funny, but chaos in the middle of order, bingo.
Yes.
There you go. Now
exactly.
You're talking.
Exactly.
That's and we have trying to get a new headline up there.
And the advantage all Canadians have is that we have chaos right at our fingertips. Right, you cross the border and you go into chaos from order. This is true. This may also explain the way we used to say it, because my family is divided north and south of the border. We're all Canadians, but many of us long resident in the States, is that the continent is truly bipolar, and the manic half is there and the depressive half is up here, right? So we get both. No, I love Canada. But you know, I mean, the lower key half. In my wife's family, who are Western Canadian, Icelandic, whenever you got an award of any kind, the first thing anyone said is, don't mention it to anyone. Don't tell anyone, for fear that people would know that you had been specially honored and picked out for that.
You know, I had a theory that, you know, the illusion, the cliche about America is that it's this optimism. And the cliche about Canada is it's more quiet, more polite. But in these two painters, the American Edward Hopper is painting depression.
Every time.
Yeah, right. And you know, melancholy. And Lawren Harris is painting optimism. So they've
exaltation, mysticism. But I think this is very true about American art generally. As Americans pride themselves, their official account of themselves, as you say, is we're an exuberant, can-do people. But all the art that Americans resonate to most deeply, whether it's the poetry of Robert Frost or the painting of Edward Hopper, is deeply, deeply, deeply melancholic and all about isolation and sadness. And that's the nature of it, and that's true about the painting right as well. I was trying to make the comparison to Canada, but my mental filing cards didn't allow me to name enough exuberant artists to make a positive comparison. But come back to something you were talking about before, being a collector, because you've been a collector and you've actually amassed several kinds of different collections, collections of different spirits.
I've been a lousy collector because I've gone through so many. When I was studying philosophy, when I was a philosophy major in college, and I would study the Greeks, and I go, wow, they really have it. And then I would study Descartes, and I go, wow, he's the great one. And then I'd go to Hume, and I go, wow, this is the one that's smart. And then you go to Kant, and then you go to Wittgenstein, and then you go to the 20th century, and I'm just always seduced by the latest, newest one. And that happened to me in collecting. I collected 19th century American paintings, landscapes.
That was how you started, right?
Zero. Yeah. Are you okay?
No.
So, and then I went to early 20th century paintings. Then I went to abstract expression, and then I just kind of kept going up. So.
Well, you have a very distinctive collection now, because you sort of really.
I have remnants.
Yes.
I have remnants of all my little.
But you had a kind of masters of modernism collection for a while, where you had big things. But now the things when I visit, that's always striking is you have this wonderful kind of eclectic collection of. What can we call it? Sort of eccentric poetic artists.
I would say that, yeah, eccentric. I mean, the collection is eccentric. Yeah, right. It doesn't cohere as a collection. It couldn't.
But all the artists that you really love, that really speak, the ones who you and Ann can sit and look at again, tend to have some quality of an enigmatic.
Well, the illusion is that collectors go, this is my choice. I'll have this one. And this, it's not the way it works at all.
Right.
It's like, hey, look what's available.
Look what they're selling.
It's available. Let's get it. And then another time you go, hey, we got lucky, but another one's available. Let's get it. So it's about availability and how much money you have at the time, or psychologically how much money you have.
Well, one of the positive things though about collecting is, it doesn't. And I know this sounds like one of those kinds of. It sounds like a very Canadian Pollyannish thing to say, very. Anne of Green Gables, but you don't need to have a lot of money to start collecting good things. When Martha and I were starting out, we were living on a Canada Council grant in New York of $3,500 a year, which the Canada Council, had figured would get us through.
Did you say a week?
If only. We started buying Japanese prints, which you could buy for very little money in those days, or photography. And it's exactly the same thing that happens as you start. All that's necessary is for you to be able to begin to appreciate the possibilities of a hierarchy within it, and almost anything becomes interesting. Any genre of art becomes interesting.
You can get there's any like you say, any genre has highs and lows and relativity
and complicated entanglements and influences, and are rewarding it, and can be endlessly rewarding in that way.
Like I believe she's Canadian. Sybil Andrews, the printmaker.
Yeah.
Fantastic collection. Those little prints are so gorgeous. They can make an entire collection out of those.
Have you ever made a big mistake? Something you bought and then the next day you knew was a mistake?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, I bought a painting in the last 2 years that I bought. It wasn't expensive, but I hung it up. A week later, it went down to the basement.
It just was wrong.
Yeah, it was like, what am I thinking?
That's good to know.
Yeah, well, it's nothing sadder than to talk about the things you've sold.
So
we won't go there.
All right,
Yeah.
we're going to the mistakenly sold. You do have two of the most beautiful drawings in the world, though, those two Seurat
That was
drawings.
very lucky by Georges Seurat.
Yeah.
2 drawings. They were in the MoMA show of Seurat. I think you wrote, if there's ever a fire, take these.
Yes, I did. Yeah, I did. I did. No, I think I wrote, let's start a fire and I will take those. in Steve and Ann's place. I know people are curious because it's something we've talked about, just stepping outside the immediate world of the visual arts for a bit. You have just written and seen performed in New York a musical, your first musical.
Yes, I wrote it with Edie Brickell. And
but you wrote the music, actually. You wrote the music and Edie wrote the lyrics.
We co-wrote the music. She did the lyrics, co-wrote the music, and I wrote the script. And it was nominated.
The book we call it.
I can never get used to that.
No.
Did you write the book? No, I didn't write a book. I just wrote a play.
Right.
And it was nominated for 5 Tonys.
I know, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
And it's a wonderful show, too, which will be, hope to...
I know what you're thinking. Did you win any? No, we didn't. Hamilton took everything.
Yes, this was the year. This was the year of Hamilton.
Yeah.
It was sort of...
But it was great to go to the Tonys because I didn't have to think about a speech. I knew Hamilton was going to win everything.
What was... Of all the realm of things that you've done, which is movies and books, and what was special about doing a musical? Was that harder than anything else you've done? I'll tell you why I ask, because as you know, I am also engaged in writing a musical that will be on next year, and it is by far the most demanding thing I have ever done by several stretches.
It's a circus. It's a circus meaning, the circus has a tent, it has performers, it has a band, it has an orchestra, it has sawdust, it has an MC, it just keeps going on.
And freaks, and many freaks in the...
It's an elaborate thing, and it's unwieldy, to move it and change it and make changes.
Right.
But it was a thrill because Edie and I talked about how much we loved musicals as kids, and we thought our music has narrative feel to it, so we just gave it a shot.
There's nothing, because it's true, there's no art form, I think, that goes so deeply into your blood as the musical.
Oh, the musicals I grew up with are just resound in my head. Music Man.
You told me once that was the role you missed, Harold Hill.
Well, I don't sing. So I couldn't sing, there are birds in the sky. I could see the people leaving.
You could have done, but you could have done the patter songs. You could have done.
I could do the patter song.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Cash
for the merchandise.
No,
Cash for the nuggins and the piggins and the firkins.
When you
Those
wanted
are
to
actual lines.
Do that. I have no answer to that. When Steve Martin is doing that,
that wasn't a question.
I have no response to that. I
wonder if speaking of that, if it's time.
I was about to say you wouldn't happen to have brought your banjo with you, would you?
My banjo. I'll get it. Let's see. Uh-oh. Oh, my mic fell apart. Just reduce the price of the tape.
Significantly.
That's my mic. That wasn't good, was it?
Do you write on banjo, by the way, or on?
Do I what?
Do you write music
on
the banjo?
Yes, I do write music on the banjo. And yep, there it is. Anyway, aren't they beautiful banjos? Just look at that. Yeah. This mic over. Can you hear me all right? My mic got back in place. Once I was asked, Steve, when your imagination goes dry, how do you replenish your creative vessel? And I said, really, can you just finish the prostate exam? Banjos are kind of tricky to tune because if you look, there's everything's a different piece. And like a violin is all one piece, or a guitar is one piece, and this has many pieces. The neck attaches to the pot. And then you have all the lights and the changing heat, and I can explain that phenomenon a little bit. See, what happens is maybe too sophisticated, but
too inside banjo.
Yeah. What happens is the photons come down and they strike the protons in the strings, and those agitate the muons and the gluons so that the moron can play. But some people do say, Steve, how do you come up with song ideas? How do you do that? And I have a little formula. It works for me. I maybe get a little half a glass of wine, go into a study, and I put on a Bob Dylan record. And I write down the words and music note for note.
Really?
Yeah, that's how I do it.
And then you just use it.
Anyway.
Well, the Swedes are missing somebody to go get that prize.
I know, I could go.
Yeah, exactly.
I could go. So this is I'll just play a quick little medley of a couple of songs I've written through the years. Thank you. Thank you very much. Always fun to play.
It's fun. You know, in all the years we've known each other, I've never had a chance to say, you're really a very good banjo player.
Thank you.
You're really, which is interesting, right? Because like Harpo Marx was not like a legend in harp circles, right? I mean, it was a thing. But you've gotten to be a...
Oh, I heard he was actually... No, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I thought he was quite a good harp player, but I don't know.
What? Well, he didn't really take the harp to his gigs, right? Because of that.
Yeah,
but
well, you can't.
You've gotten to be a
big.
You've gotten to be a better. That was the joke. That was I did it.
I see.
But you've gotten to be a more virtuosic banjo player.
I have actually, because I played on the road. I've been playing with a band for the last 10 years now.
Right.
So that makes it. Now I'll be honest with you. I played banjo for over 50 years, but I'd only played with a band live on stage. I started like 7 years ago, and some nights I'd get off and I'd think, I played really great tonight, and then other nights, I wish I'd played better. But then I went to see Eric Clapton play live. And I thought, he's not so funny.
That's true, and he has good nights and off nights, and plays the same thing. No, as you know, my son Luke used to hear you play. Was inspired by your playing to play guitar. Actually,
he was?
Yeah.
You mean he heard me play banjo and said, I want to play guitar?
Right. Well, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody heard. But one of the things that's beautiful, I never really thought about the banjo, is it's really like almost like an Eastern instrument, isn't it? Because
it has
that drone.
In this style of playing, it does have that. It has a short fifth string, so it's always a bit of a drone going on. Yeah.
It's really beautiful. Well, to come back before we leave to our first subject tonight, contemporary art.
Yes.
So I struggle to define why it is that I think that the visual arts in the way that you and I love them, painting, sculpture, printmaking, individual objects will continue to matter even when the whole world has been reduced to a set of pixels and we all walk around with a permanent oculus.
And I've never been able to figure out why. It's just unfathomable to me why all of these institutions are built to house these great, great paintings. I guess that's why, because they're great paintings. But why are they great? I don't know. We just love them. And
so that the experience of it isn't answering the inquiry why they're great, but continuing the inquiry of why it is we know they're great without ever being able to explain why that is.
Well, one thing about art, meaning paintings and this kind of world, is it's contemplative, and you can appreciate it and enjoy it in solitude. And I guess music you can do that too, but usually music you're in a crowd. Right. So I don't know. It's almost an intellectual pleasure and visceral, but I find music more of a visceral pleasure, unless you're analyzing Mozart or something.
No, it's true. Music
and you don't want to do that.
Music sits in you as an emotional experience. It corresponds almost perfectly to your emotional moods. And visual arts always, in that perplexing and yet limitlessly intriguing way, always exist just outside your own experience. Right. You're always entering into them. You're always re-exploring them.
All right. I mean, it's auction time, man. Don't you think?
I think they want to auction some pictures off too. But it's always a pleasure to sit
always
and talk
a pleasure
the world
to talk to you. You're my idol in terms of facility with language to explain the art world and many other things. But it's always beautiful and accessible when you do it and say it.
Thank you, Steve. I'm never not knocked out by the range and authority of your interest. Thank you, Steve. Steve Martin.
Thank you.